Hello and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. This is a new episode of The World Today where we are going to discuss a lot of major headlines which were published on national and international websites. We are going to focus on our regional arena and our local one too. Before we start, let me first welcome our dear guest live here in the studio, Dr. Khaled Abdelazim, our economic and political expert. Thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are going to start immediately, and our first headlines are coming from Al-Ahram Online, where we read, Egypt wins non-permanent UN Security Council seat. Egypt secured a non-permanent UN Security Council seat for the fifth time on Thursday with 179 votes. I don't think it's the fifth time, it's the sixth. Following the announcement, the spokesperson for the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, Councillor Ahmed Abu Zaid, said Egypt will work vigorously to defend and support African and Arab priorities at the Security Council. And also, right after the announcement, our top diplomat, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry, held a press conference in which he asserted that Egypt is going to have as a first priority the Middle East and the African issues. And Egypt also is going to remain on top of the countries fighting terrorism and doing or adopting balanced policies to achieve security and stability to the region. Sir, first I'd like to congratulate all Egyptians on this win and to say chapeau for Minister Sameh Shoukry and our diplomacy in general these days, because I think that you agree with me that they are doing a lot to have this balance and to build new basis for our foreign relations on mutual respect and on just returning back from being followers sometimes, unfortunately, to be on equal foot with our partners and our allies. First, your this win?
Yeah, I think that this is even can be described with the chapeau as a leapfrog, because as you rightly have mentioned, I think it's the sixth time, and the last time I think it was in the 1996 or something like that, along that line. So we have a very long history as Egypt, one of the countries that formed the United Nations, one of the 50 countries that formed the United Nations, and since that time we have secured this non-permanent position several times, but we haven't secured it for the past from 1996, which is a lot of years. So
almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. So really,
because we are going to start from the 1st of January 2016, so it's 20 years exactly.
And this is meaning that we are regaining our position in the political arena in the whole world, because sitting in the UN Security Council, you are not discussing only issues related to the Middle East or to the Arab or to the African countries, but you have a say in other issues for all of the countries in the world. And definitely I consider this as a great win for the Egyptian diplomacy. And of course it will be a great win for the Arab nations as well and the African nations, that Egypt will represent them in a correct manner and show their cases in a better fashion. Rather than, Egypt is a great country. And
to echo what you have just said, sir, the presidency released a statement yesterday to congratulate the Egyptian people on this win and to say that this victory really reflects how the international community now has trust in Egypt, especially after the Egyptian achievements after the 30th of June revolution, and that Egypt is a pivotal is going to resume its pivotal role, not only regionally but even internationally.
It is not resume
goes without saying.
It goes. Resume is we have already because we have done a pivotal role in the past few years. I think that this is why we are gaining this position.
Why I said resume, sir? Because we cannot deny that there were 4 years of political turmoil, and we do have this year under the terrorist brotherhood leadership, in which unfortunately there were ups and downs all the time in every aspect and every field. And now our diplomacy is different.
Exactly, and that's why it's a leapfrog, because if you think about the situation where Egypt was since the past 4 years, and that within the past 20 years you have not secured the UN Security Council, and you are securing this in this difficult position. That means that you have done a leapfrog compared to the constraints and the barriers that has been blocking all of your way politically, especially with all of these occurrences that you have rightly have said. And I consider that this is an achievement. The achievement is when you achieve in difficult situations, not in easy situations. This is not a normal situation, and we are achieving a great achievement that is considered by any normal standards an achievement. We have achieved it in not normal situations, in situations where where there are lots of obstacles, constraints around us in the region, politically, economically, migration of people from the Middle East.
And what's going on in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria,
exactly.
in many places, in Libya, in many places in the Arab region.
To be honest with you, that shows also that Egypt is relatively the most stable country to be able to secure that position, and hopefully to be able to try to relieve these type of crises that are in the Arab world. And also in the African nation, but in the Arab world mostly, we have so many crises now that needs a stable Arab country to interfere.
To continue with the same issue, sir, but from the Jerusalem Post this time: Egypt, Japan, Senegal, Ukraine, Uruguay win UN Security Council seats. Well, Egypt, Japan, Senegal, Ukraine, Uruguay were elected to the United Nations Security Council, the same issue. Pitting Kiev against veto power Russia in what Ukraine's foreign minister promised would not be conciliatory 2-year term. Well, another side of the coin. And for example, here we are to continue with the Jerusalem Post article saying a deadlocked UN Security Council has made more than 30 meetings on Ukraine since the siege of Crimea. Russia's UN ambassador Vitaly Churkin declined to comment on how Moscow would interact with Ukraine on the council.
It's a difficult situation for Ukraine, not for Russia, because as you know, and all the audience know, that the Security Council is 15 members. 5 of them are permanent members. One of them is Russia,
veto powers.
and they have veto powers. While all of these non-permanent members, like Egypt, Senegal, Japan, and Ukraine, and Uruguay, they are actually elected bi-yearly. So there will be an election next year, but for another 5 countries. But the term is 2 years, and I think that Ukraine will have a very difficult position with passing things related to Ukraine, especially with the Russian always vetoing it. So really, as if you have an imbalance to a certain extent in 2 countries out of the 15 that will be always in opposition somehow. And we hope that the Ukraine crisis could be solved, but
in a way.
I cannot see
some light by the end of the tunnel.
I cannot see a short-term
solution. Going to the Gulf today to continue with our regional issues and to South Sudan civil war. South Sudan civil war worsening. These were the statements said by the aid agencies from Juba. War in South Sudan is worsening despite a faltering peace deal, with thousands of women and girls unfortunately killed or raped or abducted, and the situation is for civilians is desperate and getting worse. The NGO Forum, an alliance of over than 300 South Sudanese and international aid agencies, said so. Another crisis where we do not see some light by the end of the tunnel?
In this particular crisis, no, I do see some hope. Look, most of the crises in the African nations are crises that could be sorted out not in a political fashion, could be sorted out in an economic fashion. Many of these wars are, and this type of civil wars, are a result of economic crisis in these countries. South Sudan, when it became a country that is a sovereign country, the resources in South Sudan and the economic tools for them to be a proper country is very limited for them. And when you have such limitations, then you have people fighting for power and fighting for other things. And I think that the international world, and I think that Egypt is playing, by the way, a very important role in this country, and that is trying to bring stability. I mean, Egypt is trying to bring stability throughout the whole Nile Basin Strip, by the way, and regaining all of this type of knowledge and of interaction with this very important African countries, including South Sudan. I think that the world should look into solving such problems with economic interference,
perspective,
not only with
rather than political one.
Not only with political interference. I mean, these people would not be fighting, and boys and girls fighting, if they have jobs, if they have career opportunities, if they have
if they do have the adequate standard of life.
Adequate standards of life. And if they don't, then they will go to
fight,
to take weapons and to fight. You know, this is a common thing in any place in the world. But let me just say something on that. That there is a very big project now that hopefully is going to occur in the near future that is related to the African countries that Egypt is adopting, and that's what they call the VIC-MED corridor, transport corridor, which is a corridor that is supposed to link Victoria Lakes to the Nile, through the Nile River into the Mediterranean Sea, and passing 9 countries, including South Sudan. And South Sudan is very famous to have a very big strip of the Nile River and navigable, i.e. you can navigate the Nile in this, and I think that this will be beneficial. I think that this is one of the initiatives that our president is actually there is something in the African nation, in the African Union, called the presidential leadership of projects. I think this is one of the projects where we have the leadership in it, and this is the type of projects that we need. We need to give hope to the people. We need to
I like this. We need to give hope to the people.
Hope to the people through big projects, you know.
Through big projects. But I don't think that there is hope that the United States is going to change its stance toward the Palestinians, or at least to describe the situation as is, not as the Israelis want it to be. From the World Bulletin we read, U.S. calls Israeli stabbing of Palestinians terrorism. The stabbing of a Palestinian by a 17-year-old Israeli in Dimona was an act of terror. We have had the chance to look at that attack more deeply, and I think you are going to ask me, what do we consider an act of terrorism? And we do. I would say certainly individuals on both sides of this divide have proven capable of guilty acts of terrorism. The words are a departure from Kirby's response, the State Department spokesperson, to the incident last week. Well, unfortunately, at least 34 Palestinians were killed and more than 1,600 injured from the start of October after what they call as the Israeli-Palestinian violence, but not the Israeli aggression on Al-Aqsa Mosque and on the Palestinian civilians who were just having stones but facing rubber bullets. People, I mean here the ordinary citizens, sir, are thinking about what's going on as the paving the way for another intifada or a third intifada or uprising. Others are saying that it started with Israelis punishing the Palestinians after the Palestinian flag was raised in the UN headquarters by the beginning of October. The political analysts would say that these are provocations by the Israelis, and it's going just to pass without more casualties. How do you see the situation?
No, I see the situation as could be a third uprising, and it could be, if it happened to be an uprising, it will not be like the first and the second one, because in this instances you have the Palestinians, Israelis are also involved, i.e. the people who are living inside Israel, and they may have Israeli nationalities, but they are from a Palestinian origin. And that shows beyond no doubt, that whatever you do to neutralize such population, even to absorb it into your mainstream and everything, yet still, if you exercise an act of injustice, these people will rise, because at the end of the day, they are still rooted Palestinians, and this is the interesting thing about this particular situation. Many of the analysts have described this as not Hamas or other in the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas or only intifada. No, no, no. It is an intifada of normal Palestinians who may not be loyal to any of these two parties, that they are feeling oppressed. They are feeling that
loyal to the land,
loyal
sir.
to the land, exactly right.
Loyal to Al-Aqsa.
Exactly right.
They are
And
only
that is-
teens.
yeah,
You're talking
yeah,
about people who
yeah,
are,
yeah.
or youth from
Yeah,
17 to 19 years old, and
Right.
that's it.
Rightly
Why
so.
I'm asking this question politically, because there are media reports saying that John Kerry, the American State Secretary of State, is going to pay a visit to the Middle East region starting Monday or Tuesday, because he has some other commitments before Monday. So he is expected here on Monday. I mean, here in the Middle East. Do you think that he is going to have some mediation talks?
He will, and his visit proves beyond no doubt that the escalation is not in the favor of Israel. John Kerry will not visit Israel, will not visit the Middle East unless he's trying to relieve pressure on Israel somehow. I think that there is pressure on Israel of what's happening, and there is a potential for more crisis happening, and that's why he's visiting. He's not visiting for the eyes of the Palestinian.
Yep, sure.
He's sure visiting for the eyes of Israel, and that means for sure that what we have just said rightly now, that this is a potential for a certain uprising, and probably they are trying to relieve the pressure for that by mediation through political powers that exist in the Palestinian side and in the Israeli side.
From the Khalij time, we continue to read the Syrian forces launch a new offensive as Putin wraps U.S. Regime forces backed by Russian airstrikes pushed an offensive in central Syria on Thursday as Russian President Vladimir Putin slammed Washington for not working with Moscow on the conflict. How do you see the Russian performance in Syria, sir?
Interesting. It's very. I mean, for sure, the crisis in Syria has prolonged to such an extent that the country is being ruined, and the people are leaving, and the people are dying. So there must be an end to that crisis. I still believe that the end of the crisis will not be through wars. It will
not
be
the
through,
security solution.
Yeah. But however, maybe such interference of Russia is leading to the political settlement, because it's trying to put a certain facts on the grounds, so that when it comes to the political settlement...
I kept asking this question for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Do you think with the disappearance of Bashar al-Assad, the case in Syria is going to be better, or reaching a political settlement is going to be easier?
Look, the experience has shown beyond no doubt that before you let somebody leave, regardless of all of his defaults and all of his upsets and mistakes, you have to know who's coming. So
who is the alternative?
What's the alternative? I mean, unless there is an alternative, and that alternative is better than the current situation, the current situation is relatively very bad, to be honest with you. I mean,
sure.
2.5% of Bashar al-Assad and the Alawiyin is dominating Syria since a very long time, is not healthy. By the way, let me just say something here, that throughout the history, if you read the history, you will know that Egypt and Syria has been the two key pillars in this region throughout the whole history, for 14,000 years even. And Egypt needs to have a strong Syria. There is no doubt about it.
Sure.
But for sure, strong Syria means at the end of the day, where the people of Syria, the Syrian people, are comfortable, Syria is stable, Syria is well ruled. Now, I'm trying to escape the question to a certain extent, because there is no definite answer, because there is no alternative yet.
Okay, I do have a definite answer.
Okay.
Just to give our audience some example and let them decide. Is Iraq better after Saddam Hussein? No. And is Libya better after Muammar Gaddafi? This is the question.
This is where we said we need the alternative,
But even if we do not have an alternative right now, are those countries better after the disappearance, or the killing, to be accurate, of the tyrants who once ruled them?
I mean, this is definitely, we have to learn from these mistakes. And
this is what I'm saying, just to learn from the lessons we have on the ground. But the UN have hopes in Yemen. This is another story from the Gulf today. Yemen peace talks soon, hopes UN. UN Deputy Secretary General Jan Eliasson said that he hoped that peace talks to end the war in Yemen could start by the end of October, despite deep mistrust between Saudi Arabia and Iran, who back the opposing sides. It's very interesting to describe the Houthi militias as just opposing sides. How we can consider those who seized power or grabbed power and seized Sana'a and moved Yemen to civil war, that they are just opposition.
This is the irony of the West. I mean, we have to describe things in the right context beyond no doubt. The area where to the east, the Arab countries that exist in the east, definitely Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, of course. The West is definitely playing on the sectarian thing, which is basically, let's say correctly, Shia and Sunni. Okay. Now there is no doubt that they are playing this, and they are trying to get the areas into potential wars. Potential wars, at the end of the day, they have two major outcomes. The first one is these countries will buy more weapons, and so these factories will produce more weapons, and they will flourish. And on the other side, it will create a certain new geographical situations on the ground, and then these people will have a political settlement. Things could go back to its original way, and then another cycle of living peacefully, and then another cycle of violence. So at the end of the day, we as the people living in the region, whether they are Sunni or Shias, have to understand how to live together, because there is no way one could eliminate the other. This will never happen. What will happen is that we have to organize ourselves in such a way to live together. At the end of the day, you are right. The Houthi has no right to seize power, has no right to come and to come into Yemen with Iran backing. Okay, if it is purely a civil war, that's something else that could be sorted internally. But it is not a purely civil war. It's look, most of the wars that is happening in the regions are people fighting for other countries. So
and for their private and special interests.
And for private and special interests.
And topping this, since we are talking about Yemen, I don't know what the role of Ali Abdullah Saleh.
The last thing you
private
said, interest.
Yes.
Exactly. I mean, there's
a lot to say about the game of politics, which I'll never understand. So, Dr. Khaled Abdelazim, our expert, our economic and political expert, thank you very much for your input, sir.
Thank you very much. One last word. I would like to congratulate the great spirit of the two teams, Ahli and Zamalek, yesterday in the match, although it's not political and economic, but it shows how we...
But they were, to some extent, such ambassadors for Egypt
definitely,
outside, and it ended in a nice way, alhamdulillah. So congratulations to all Egyptians. Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, by this we come to the end of this episode of The World Today. Till we meet again same time on Nile TV International. Many thanks for watching. On behalf of Tariq Farouk, Magdi Sliman, Fariel, Muhammad Abdullah, and myself, Nermeen Abdurrahman, many thanks for watching, and have a very good afternoon.